Welcome, my friends, to the lecture on diversification. Here we're going to be covering one of the foundational principles of finance. One of the basics, it's also one of the most interesting because it gives you an unfair advantage that is very much real and very much provable and measurable. Some consider it to be the only free lunch in finance. So when it comes to finance, generally because of the efficient market hypothesis and the nature of the market itself, we find that the competition is incredibly intense. Therefore, most advantages in the market either don't persist or they're not very useful. Diversification is the only known exception to this rule, where no matter how many people that participate, generally speaking, in the process of diversification, it actually continues to persist and serve its function to give us outsized rewards relative to the effort that we put into it. But I'll explain a little bit further. So, diversification at its core, what it means is to hold or be involved in more than one thing at one time. For example, if you hold on to one stock or one company, if you are so inclined to, that company may go broke and therefore you lose all of your money. However, if you had your money in two companies and one went broke, well, you'd still have 50% of your money left. So you can see in this sense that diversification is actually quite helpful. Obviously, it comes with the downside of punishing you for holding star performers if you have too much diversification. So if you have one that goes up a lot, you only receive half the gains. However, you'll find that when you combine enough of these companies together, something magical starts to happen and you start to receive an outsized benefit for the ratio of the risk to reward. So you'll find that your risk goes down faster than your rewards, which means that over time, you actually get a better overall performance when you start to include more diversification, which is why most people choose to hold as many things as possible. This goes for traditional finance. This goes for most other assets as well. It doesn't go so much for crypto, but we'll cover that in a minute, so hold on to your horses while I just explain it a little bit further. So in the chart that I have on the screen right now, you can see the effect of diversification. We have two companies, asset A and asset B, or two projects, or two commodities, or whatever you'd like to describe them as. So you can see that over time, we have the red one, which does quite well early on, has a lot of performance, and then suddenly it has a terrible crash right at the end. And we have company B or asset B that doesn't do very well early on. And then at the very end, it outperforms and does incredibly well. Now, what if we held 50% of both? You can see that the green line is actually a great representation of what would happen to both assets. You would have the average performance between the two of them. And you can see that even though at the very end, when asset A collapsed by a huge amount, it actually didn't affect the portfolio that much because asset B was counteracting the effect the whole time. So what you can see here is actually a symbiotic effect between these two assets. When they're in the market, one goes down, one goes up, and they counteract each other and they smooth out the bumps in the road. This is even better as well when you have multiple assets that are biased to go upwards over time. So if you're holding a lot of things that generally drift up together, then you have a massive advantage, like all of these things working together in symphony to give you the most performance possible while also outsized effects of decreasing your risk. Now, diversification has been known as protection from ignorance for a very long time in the financial market. However, we don't have to be too ignorant to the science of how many assets do we hold, which is enough, because the question next that you'll be asking is, well, that's fantastic. If holding two assets is good, then doesn't that mean holding 10 is better? Holding 500 million is better? Why not hold every asset in the world? And you're mostly correct. There are limitations, practical limitations, depending on how you want to approach the market and your investing style. The chart that you see on your screen now is the portfolio risk chart. Now you can see down the bottom it says number of stocks. As we increase the number of stocks, we have this curved line which represents the reduction in non-systematic risk. Now, I will describe what non-systematic risk is. Non-systematic risk is risk which is inherent to the individual asset itself. This means if I am holding a share of Apple and I am holding a share of Google and Apple blows up, that is non-systematic risk because it didn't have anything to do with the overall system. It only had something to do with the company itself. The economy was fine. Apple was the thing that blew up. This is non-systematic risk. Systematic risk is where you have the entire economy that blows up. This is risk that cannot be diversified away. Hence why on the chart you see the systematic risk as being a band down the bottom, which the curved line can never go below. This is because eventually, no matter how many assets you add into your portfolio, there will be a limit to how much risk that you can diversify away between those different companies. Once you add enough companies or enough assets into the portfolio, what you're left with is actually the risk inherent in the activity itself, or the overall economy, or the system that you're exposed to. There are many different words used to describe this, but the main point is that there is risk that you can diversify away, and there is risk that you cannot diversify away. Ultimately, we want to get as close to that maximum point as possible and simply accept the risk that we can't diversify away. So we can get a little more detailed with this. What I want to show you is this table of different stocks and sectors so that you can get an idea of how different diversification techniques actually affect different selections of assets. So on the far right-hand side, what you have is an individual company, CBA, which represents a bank in Australia. Next level to the left, you have the financial sector, which represents all of the banks. Next level to the left, you have Australia, which represents all of the companies in all of the sectors within Australia. Next level to the left, you have the United States, whose economy directly affects the performance of the Australian economy. And then at the left, again, you have the world, which affects the United States and, of course, everything leading down from there. So you can see in this way, the higher you go up, the more things that you diversify between, the more broad your exposure, the less risks you're taking on, specifically speaking. So you're diversifying away all of those different risks, and then at the very end, when you only hold a portfolio of assets that represents everything in the world, the only thing that you have to be concerned about is the international trade effects, the macroeconomic effects basically, and the international political risk. So with this being said, you can see that there is an immense benefit to diversification in the way that it actually eliminates all of these different styles of risk. And this is fantastic. However, of course, there are limits to how effective this can be. So in this next chart, you can see that this is just a different way of describing the diversification risk. I think it's a bit more accurate than one of the previous ones that I showed you. You can see that there is unique risk up the top and then market risk down the bottom. I actually prefer this wording of it because unique risk is good. It's like the unique risk inherent in those stocks themselves. And the total risk is the combination of unique risk and market risk. Now you can see that the curve of this diversification kind of reaches zero, or it reaches its maximum around 10 stocks in the portfolio. So if you were to increase the number of holdings from 0 to 5 or 1 to 5, you have an amazing increase in diversification benefit. However, when you move from 5 to 10, you receive incrementally less benefit. And then from 10 to 15, you essentially receive no additional benefit for each company that you're holding or asset that you're holding. You can interpret this a whole bunch of different ways, but generally you can see that it's not super beneficial to hold more than 10 or 15 different stocks in a stock portfolio. The next question will be, well, how does this apply to cryptocurrencies? We'll dive into this with more detail in the following lectures. However, you can see here on the screen that the diversification chart, crypto edition, generally speaking, 2 cryptos is probably the most that you'll want to have to receive all of that diversification benefit. This is because the entire crypto market is very highly correlated, but we'll explore this in one of the following lectures, so we won't spend much time on it. This is just an explanation of how diversification affects the performance of that portfolio. So diversification is actually more than just an asset selection and portfolio management technique. The old saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail analogy comes up in my mind. This means that if you have just one company, you may think that that company, like Tesla, for example, people become obsessed with fucking Tesla for some reason. I don't know why. This is a stocks example, but if you've got Tesla and everybody wants to trade just Tesla, then all you're going to be thinking about is Tesla and you're going to be blind to everything else. Likewise, when it comes to decision making in your portfolio or in your day-to-day life, or in your analysis or anything. Diversification between information sources is going to bring you closer to the truth than just a single opinion, a single piece of data, a single measurement. You need to have diversification between inputs into all of your life. The more information that you have at your disposal, the better. This can lead, honestly, to information paralysis, overanalysis, and a bit of paranoia. However, as long as you have good information-based systems, it's not so bad. You can use systemization to aggregate all of this information, but honestly, diversification should be seen as a very valid decision-making tool, something that you should be using in your personal life so that you're not being unfairly influenced by just a single piece of information. So in summary, diversification is the only universally agreed and accepted method of gaining an unfair advantage in the market when it comes to increasing your risk-adjusted returns. Diversification mainly works best when you have several assets working together that have unique behavioral characteristics. So if you have stocks, for example, you want one stock that's from the automotive sector. You want one stock that's from the manufacturing sector. You want one stock that's from the clothing sector and from the technology sector. And you want to combine different assets that have different personalities to get that best diversified effect. It's seen in the cryptocurrency market generally. There is not much diversification benefit, but we'll cover that soon. When it comes to reducing portfolio risk, there is a limit to how far diversification goes. Once you eliminate all of the unique stock risk, you actually are left with the systematic risk, which is the risk inherent in the system that you're participating in, or the risk inherent in the market that you're participating in. This cannot be diversified away. However, you can use additional information to manage this risk, which leads me to the final point, which is diversification is a valid decision-making technique and something that should be applied to your general life, not only when it comes to analysis and investing, but also in general decision-making. More information is better. You should be trying to find the average of all your observations. This kind of leads into the discussion of how stereotypes work and how people should be using stereotypes to make judgments, and they should be using the average observations. You have a bit of an idea now of how diversification works at a high level, and we'll be exploring in later lessons whether or not this is an effective technique for the cryptocurrency market. However, you can see that this is an effect that is generally beneficial for other uses in the financial world. So with that being said, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.